Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take those complex blueprints, really bold strategies, and high-stakes policy ideas from around the globe, and we try to extract the most vital knowledge for you.
And today, we're really undertaking a deep exploration. We're looking at structural, systemic transformation, not just, tweaking things around the edges.
No, not at all.
We're diving into a very detailed strategic document, and it focuses on the Indian state of Bihar.
Right. Our sources lay out this campaign vision, developed by the political strategist Prashant Kishor PK. It's about transforming this huge, complex region. But what's really crucial to understand, I think, is that we're looking beyond just, say, political promises or manifestos. This is framed as a comprehensive white paper.
Yeah, it's detailed.
Very detailed. It lays out 7 highly interconnected policy pillars. And these are designed for nothing less than a complete economic and societal overhaul for a region that's just, well, critical to India's future.
And the scale of that challenge, it absolutely necessitates this kind of audacious thinking. You have to be bold.
You really do.
Bihar has long struggled with a specific historical narrative, right? High population, lots of migration out, persistent underdevelopment. It's a story many people know.
Yeah, that narrative is strong.
But to put some numbers on it, to quantify that challenge, Bihar contributes only about, get this, 3% to India's national GDP.
Only 3%?
Despite being home to nearly 9% of the entire country's population. That's a huge gap. You've got this immense human capital, but it's just not translating into economic output in the way you'd expect.
And that economic disparity, that specific gap, that's the core problem this blueprint is trying to tackle, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's framed as a mission not just to, improve Bihar incrementally, but to actually move it past that historical poverty narrative altogether.
Precisely. And the ultimate vision, the one that's laid out in the source material, it's really ambitious. It's to reposition Bihar as a, and I'm quoting here, global model for corruption-free governance, digital agriculture, and inclusive economic growth.
A global model. That's quite a statement.
It is. And what's fascinating is how the document doesn't just look inwards for solutions. It explicitly says it draws inspiration from structural successes globally.
Like where?
Well, it mentions places like Costa Rica, their bold institutional reforms, or Estonia's pioneering work in e-governance.
Estonia, right, the digital nation.
Exactly. Seeing those as models for achieving, international legitimacy, not just through PR, but through fundamental systemic change, real change on the ground.
Okay, so the mission is clear. Use these big structural ideas to make that leap forward. Let's unpack the first one, maybe the most foundational. Getting the state apparatus clean, reliable, functional. Right, so the journey starts, according to this blueprint, with a pretty radical anti-corruption framework. And what immediately jumps out is that the intellectual DNA for this, well, it's sourced from places far outside traditional Indian policy circles.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. It mentions heavy inspiration from youth movements, like the Nepal Gen Z revolution, and also the foundational principles of economic integrity from the Kalkism Research Center in Kathmandu.
So, importing ideas, revolutionary grassroots ideas about governance from just next door.
It seems so. It suggests a real desire to maybe shake things up with fresh thinking on integrity.
And what's unique about this blueprint, I think, is that it recognizes that you can't just, stamp out corruption with slogans or posters. It requires fundamentally restructuring how money actually moves.
Digging down to the plumbing.
Exactly. So it proposes 3 immediate, pretty fundamental pillars for establishing a corruption-free economy. And these target the roots of illicit activity, not just the symptoms you see on the surface.
Okay, let's break those down. Lay out those 3 pillars, and let's dissect the mechanics a bit.
Okay, pillar number 1, the shift to a cashless economy.
All right.
The proposal calls for transitioning virtually all interstate transactions to digital payment platforms. Now, in India, this primarily means leveraging existing systems like UPI, the Unified Payments Interface.
And maybe we should just pause on that for a second. For our international listeners, UPI isn't just like using a credit card online. It's a real-time, identity-linked payment rail between banks. Instantaneous.
That's a crucial distinction, yes. It creates a digital footprint for pretty much every single transaction. So by making digital transactions the default way to pay and potentially the mandatory way for everything from, say, state utility bills to buying vegetables from a local vendor.
Everything, wow.
Well, the ambition seems to be comprehensive. The sources argue that doing this inherently minimizes the opportunities for that small-scale daily corruption, the illicit financial flows that physical cash makes so easy.
The untraceable stuff.
Exactly. This is about trying to choke off the lifeblood of unaccounted money right at the transaction level, where the money actually changes hands.
Okay, so that tackles the flow of physical cash.
Yeah.
But corruption, well, it also operates through the control of credit, right? Who gets loans, who doesn't.
Absolutely.
So what's the second pillar? How does it address the financial infrastructure itself?
The second pillar is the plan to establish state-owned banks. The idea is to merge existing regional cooperative banks, which often serve rural areas, and bring them under direct public control.
State control.
Yes. The objective is explicitly stated: secure state and public control over the critical arteries of credit distribution. And the blueprint, interestingly, explicitly mentions the precedent of Iceland's nationalization of its major banks after the 2008 financial crisis.
That is quite a parallel to draw. Iceland did that out of sheer necessity, right?
Yeah.
To prevent total systemic collapse and keep control over capital. Is the thinking similar here? Protecting the local economy.
Essentially, yes, but maybe framed more for developmental leverage rather than just crisis management. By consolidating and nationalizing these local cooperative structures, the state gains the direct administrative power to dictate lending policies. Policies that prioritize, say, local farmers, micro-entrepreneurs, state infrastructure projects. Instead of being primarily subjected to the profit maximization mandates you'd see in purely private institutions, it shifts the main goal of that lending infrastructure from shareholder return towards state development goals.
Okay, but let me push back on that a bit, because that sounds like an enormous political risk. Isn't the core danger here that you simply trade one potential form of corruption, maybe private profiteering, for another? Like state-level political cronyism, or just sheer inefficiency?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
How does the blueprint propose keeping things transparent when the state itself holds all the financial keys? That seems tricky.
It's definitely the crucial political balancing act. The white paper suggests mitigating this risk by embedding these state banks within that broader digital framework we just talked about.
Oh, okay. Connecting the pieces.
Right. The transition to a cashless economy provides an audit trail, you see. The bank transactions themselves would be digitally logged, and ideally they'd be audited by an independent, digitally enabled state financial oversight body, something maybe inspired by Estonia's digital public ledger systems.
Transparency by design.
That's the idea. Build transparency into the tech framework itself, making large-scale cronyism or embezzlement computationally difficult to hide. At least that's the theory.
That's a powerful answer, theoretically.
Yeah.
Now, let's get to the third pillar. And this one sounds perhaps the most economically audacious, the zero interest rates plan.
Yeah, this one really targets the agricultural sector and new entrepreneurs, people starting small
The
businesses.
base of the economy.
Exactly. The goal is to pilot zero-interest credit lines. But crucially, this credit isn't modeled on traditional debt with fixed interest payments that, can cripple people if things go wrong.
Right.
Instead, it's modeled on an outcome-based profit-sharing mechanism. It's a concept that actually draws some inspiration from principles in Islamic banking, where the lender shares the risk alongside the borrower.
Okay, so the state isn't demanding a fixed interest payment every month, regardless of whether a farmer had a good harvest or a startup actually made sales.
So that's the core idea.
It's tying its return to the borrower's actual outcome. But how does the state practically measure that success? And what exactly is its profit share? That sounds complicated.
Yeah, the mechanics here are vital and probably complex to implement. The proposal suggests the state takes its return not necessarily through direct profit sharing, which, as you say, can be administratively messy, but perhaps through accelerated structured revenue channels later on. For a successful enterprise, maybe this means offering a structured tax holiday for a fixed period, say 3 years, to let them grow. But after that period, the enterprise has to meet some predefined growth metric. Maybe revenue, maybe employment. Once they hit that metric, the state then recaptures its initial investment and maybe then some through increased, possibly accelerated, tax collection or employment taxes generated.
So the state shares the risk of failure early on,
Right.
but gets a bigger slice of the long-term success through jobs, economic activity, future taxes.
Exactly. It's like patient, strategic venture capital from the state rather than short-term banking focused on interest extraction.
This sounds like it could genuinely remove that fear of fixed debt, the
Yeah.
kind that drives so many farmers into distress, especially with unpredictable weather and markets.
Precisely. It's about injecting patient, productive capital directly into the economy's base without creating immediate debt traps. But of course, this raises the huge question. Feasibility. Where does the money for these zero-interest lines come from?
Especially given Bihar's current fiscal constraints. How is that funded?
The financing strategy here involves a pretty major structural shift, rechanneling existing state subsidies. Ah, okay. Moving money around.
Right. Instead of pouring money into potentially inefficient or, poorly targeted short-term welfare schemes or subsidies, those funds, which are estimated to be substantial, would be redirected
To where?
into dedicated capitalized funds specifically designed for these zero-interest microloans. Now, this transition obviously requires significant political will.
Because you're dismantling existing systems.
You're dismantling existing, often politically popular subsidy structures. That's never easy.
No. And the sources do acknowledge that for full adoption, you'd need the central government's okay alignment on monetary policy.
Yes, that's a key dependency for the zero-interest aspect especially.
But even before that, what about the immediate risk of capital flight? If private banks feel threatened by state control or zero-interest competition, won't they just pull out?
They might. It's a definite risk. The blueprint seems to suggest a phased rollout to manage this, focusing initially on smaller-scale, state-level zero-interest microloans to sort of prove the model works, build confidence.
Test the waters. Exactly. And the other major risk we have to mention is that inflationary pressure you hinted at earlier. If the state injects massive amounts of new credit into the local economy too quickly without corresponding increases in actual production or services,
You just get prices going up.
you risk flooding the market with money chasing too few goods, leading to inflation that hurts the very poor they're trying to help. This needs really meticulous management, probably close collaboration with the Reserve Bank of India, to ensure credit expansion is somehow tethered to tangible outputs like increased agricultural storage, new businesses actually forming.
Okay, so step one is establishing the integrity of money and credit. Clean finances. And once you have that integrity theoretically allows you to build trust in your physical assets.
Yeah.
Which brings us right to the next massive challenge, land and logistics. All right, here's where things get, really interesting technologically. Applying deep tech solutions to what are arguably Bihar's two most contested, most foundational physical assets, land and agricultural produce.
Foundational is the right word.
Let's start with land. Why is land tenure, just owning land clearly, such a crisis point in Bihar? What's the root problem?
Well, land tenure is arguably the state's most fundamental development obstacle. You have endless disputes over ownership, you have corrupted or just lost paper records, a lack of clear, legally recognized titles.
So what does that mean practically?
It means that land, the most valuable asset for most people, often cannot be legally used as collateral for loans.
Okay. Connects back to the finance piece.
Exactly. If a farmer can't prove he legally owns his land, secure it, he can't access that zero-interest credit we just discussed, or any formal credit, really. It completely stifles economic activity at the ground level. It fuels endless litigation, court cases, and it feeds corruption-paying officials for favorable records, etc.
A total bottleneck. So the proposed solution is described as a radical digital land reform. How exactly would this blueprint achieve what it calls an incorruptible digital land registry across a state that size? That sounds like a monumental task.
It is monumental, and it starts with a technology-driven inventory, a complete mapping. The plan calls for complete high-resolution satellite mapping of all land plots across the entire state.
All of them using satellites.
Yes, and the sources are remarkably specific here. They estimate this massive undertaking could actually be completed within 18 months.
18 months. That seems incredibly fast.
How contracting resources from ISRO, that's India's space research organization, or possibly specialized private space companies that offer rapid aerial surveying and mapping services. This creates that foundational, hopefully tamper-proof spatial database of where every single parcel of land physically is located.
Okay, you have the map from space, but how do you link that map securely to the actual owner on the ground? That seems like the tricky part.
That's the next crucial step, Aadhaar integration.
Aadhaar, India's national biometric ID system.
Exactly. The digital land titles, the certified records derived from the satellite mapping would be securely linked with the verified biometrics in the Aadhaar system. Your fingerprint, your iris scan, tied to your land plot's digital record.
So that provides clear, theoretically tamper-proof verification of ownership.
That's the goal. It makes it extremely difficult for fraudulent transfers or boundary disputes to happen secretly because the digital record isn't just tied to a piece of paper that can be forged or lost, it's tied to a verified person through biometrics.
Now, we should probably analyze the precedents here, because this isn't just a wild idea dreamed up in isolation, right? Other places have done something like this.
Absolutely not. It has transformed other regions, and the sources explicitly look at two distinct models for inspiration.
Okay.
First, they point to Rwanda's 2009 land tenure regularization program. Rwanda successfully mapped, I think it was around 11 million parcels of land. And by formalizing ownership this way, they dramatically boosted citizens' ability to access credit and actually invest in their land. It unlocked value.
So Rwanda for the scale and the economic impact. What's the second model?
For the security and incorruptibility aspect, they point again to Estonia. Estonia uses a sophisticated, transparent, blockchain-based registry for its digital land records. Blockchain makes the records immutable, virtually incorruptible, publicly verifiable.
Right.
So Bihar seems to be aiming to combine the scale and speed of Rwanda's mapping effort with the cutting-edge digital security architecture pioneered by Estonia.
Okay, so you create this secure, verified asset base. The land is mapped, ownership is clear, and then this becomes the foundation for that financial leap we talked about earlier. The blueprint introduces this concept of land equity bonds. What are those?
This is a really crucial financing mechanism proposed in the plan. The government itself holds substantial amounts of public land owned by the state, often unused or underutilized.
Right.
Instead of just selling it off piece by piece, which can be politically difficult and maybe not the best value, they plan to use this public land as the underlying collateral to issue these bonds on the national and potentially international capital markets.
Okay, so the state is effectively getting cash now based on the value of the land, but without actually selling the land itself.
Precisely. It's unlocking the value locked up in that dormant asset.
How does this differ from, say, a traditional municipal bond? And why would an international investor buy a land equity bond from Bihar? What makes it attractive?
Good question. Traditional municipal bonds are usually backed by the issuer's general creditworthiness, their promise to pay, maybe future tax revenues. Land equity bonds, as proposed here, are backed by a tangible, finite asset, the actual title deed of the specific public land parcels.
Which are now digitally verified and secure.
Exactly, which makes them, theoretically, less risky from a legal and ownership perspective. For international investors, especially those looking for infrastructure projects or impact investments, the appeal is twofold. One, they get a security purportedly tied to a real physical asset. And two, the funds raised are typically earmarked specifically for those long-term infrastructure and social development projects outlined in the plan, the refrigerated railways, the tech hubs, etc. It transforms a dormant state asset into potentially billions of dollars of investment capital for development.
Okay, so land ownership secured, funding mechanism potentially unlocked. Now let's shift focus to the other major physical asset, agricultural logistics. Bihar is agriculturally rich, produces a lot of food, but the fundamental problem often cited is that it's massive agricultural surplus. Well, a lot of it rots before it can reach high-value markets.
That post-harvest loss is just a massive, tragic economic drain year after year.
So what's the proposed solution here?
The solution proposed is ambitious. Essentially bypass the often poor road network and unreliable local supply chains by focusing on dedicated, high-speed rail infrastructure, specifically the creation of cold chain railway corridors.
Cold chain, meaning refrigerated railways.
Yes, refrigerated train carriages running on dedicated routes.
And running directly from the major agricultural production centers, the plan mentions Patna and Gaya specifically straight to the crucial Kolkata port, which is the gateway to the Bay of Bengal and international shipping.
That's exactly right. And this isn't just about improving domestic transport. This is explicitly linked to achieving a global export ambition.
Taking Bihar's produce global.
Yes. By rapidly and reliably moving temperature-sensitive produce, think high-value fruits, vegetables, other perishables to Kolkata's port facilities, the state can then potentially secure direct export agreements with international markets. The document mentions places like Dubai and Singapore specifically, major food import hubs.
So this process could radically transform Bihar's image and economy, from being known as a net exporter of raw labor
to becoming a global exporter of high-value processed or fresh agricultural goods. It's a complete reversal of the current dynamic.
But this transformation, I mean, refrigerated wagons, specialized rail infrastructure, port upgrades, that requires huge upfront capital expenditure, doesn't it? Where does that money come from?
It absolutely does. It's a major cost. But the sources suggest mitigating this financial risk by emphasizing the use of public-private partnership, PPP contracts.
Ah, bringing in private companies.
Yes, partnering with global logistics firms that already have the expertise and capital to build and manage sophisticated cold chains. This shifts a large part of the initial capital burden away from the state onto the private sector partner.
Okay, but the private partner needs assurance they'll get a return.
Of course. And furthermore, the plan suggests the state would work to secure export guarantees, basically. Confirmed purchase orders or agreements from places like Dubai's food import hubs before the major construction even starts.
So you de-risk the investment.
Exactly. You ensure the massive infrastructure investment is immediately justified by confirmed paying customers on the other end. It ensures the rail lines don't get built and then sit empty.
And you mentioned international precedents for this kind of logistics-led transformation. It's not just theory.
No, it's a proven strategy for resource-rich areas that lack infrastructure. You look at Chile, for example. Their cold chain exports of high-value berries, particularly to China, were enabled by exactly this kind of targeted infrastructure investment. It allowed their rural sector to access premium global prices, leading to sustained income increases.
Right.
Or you consider Israel's sophisticated refrigerated logistics. It allows them to export vast quantities of fresh produce globally, efficiently, despite operating in a challenging desert environment. Bihar is attempting to replicate this core model, connect high-quality local produce directly to high-paying global consumers, essentially cutting out the unreliable, value-destroying domestic middleman.
Okay. So we've covered clean governance, secured assets like land, and a mechanism to move physical products globally. The next logical step seems to be building the high-value knowledge workforce that could leverage this new digital and physical spine. All right, now we're moving into the digital leapfrog strategy. The source material really emphasizes treating 5G technology not just as, a faster way to watch videos on your phone.
Right, not just a consumer good.
But as the new physical infrastructure, like the new equivalent of roads and bridges and power lines.
That is an absolutely essential conceptual shift they're proposing.
Yeah.
By treating 5G rollout like building highways and bridges, the state signals that universal, ultra-fast, cheap broadband access is the fundamental prerequisite.
Requisite for what?
For its massive population, especially its youth, to actually participate meaningfully in the 21st century global economy. This allows Bihar to potentially build on one of its inherent strengths, its large pool of educated or potentially educable young people.
Okay, so you roll out ubiquitous 5G. What does that infrastructure then enable in terms of human capital? The plan talks about this concept of digital villages. What does that mean?
Digital villages seems to be the strategy for decentralizing opportunity instead of everyone needing to migrate to big cities for good jobs.
Right, the traditional path.
It leverages the fact that Bihar has this large, talented, but often underutilized workforce, typically forced to migrate elsewhere for work. The vision is to bring the work to them digitally.
How specifically? What kind of work are we talking about?
Well, the examples given are quite concrete. We're talking about, say, Bihari tutors with strong subject knowledge teaching students anywhere in the world through global online education platforms.
Okay, remote teaching.
Or specialized yoga and wellness experts from Bihar connecting with global clients via high-definition video streaming for classes or consultations. And critically, enabling rural freelancers to participate directly in the international service economy.
What kind of freelance work?
Things like legal process outsourcing, digital marketing support, maybe agricultural data analysis or consultation services, all conducted remotely from their village, powered by that cheap, reliable 5G connection.
So this essentially aims to eliminate the geographic penalty that usually comes with high-skill work, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to be in Bangalore or Delhi anymore.
Exactly. It aims to mirror the kind of rapid, decentralized economic expansion that's been seen in some neighboring countries. The document specifically connects this vision to the Bangladesh freelance economy boom.
Ah, interesting comparison.
Which really surged following the strategic, widespread expansion of cheap, high-speed broadband access across that country. Treat the infrastructure as a public good, and it can unleash decentralized entrepreneurship on a massive scale.
But, a thriving knowledge economy usually also needs physical anchors, right?
Yeah.
Centers of gravity to attract major investment, foster collaboration, build that ecosystem.
Oh, we need hubs.
And that's where the proposed Silicon Ganga Special Economic Zone, SEZ, in Patna comes into the picture.
Right. This SEZ is envisioned as the physical centerpiece of this high-tech shift. It's intended to be a designated geographical area, probably near Patna, with special regulatory and tax incentives.
To attract what kind of industries?
Specifically focusing on attracting investment in bleeding-edge sectors, artificial intelligence, AI, software as a service, SaaS, and broader IT exports. The aim is really to seed a vibrant startup ecosystem there.
Okay, are there specific, measurable economic goals attached to this SEZ in the plan? And what kind of incentives are they actually proposing to lure companies and VCs?
The goals stated are highly ambitious. The white paper apparently targets attracting $500 million in global venture capital VC funding over 5 years, just into this zone.
$500 million, that's serious money.
It is. And to achieve this, the SEZ would offer significant regulatory flexibility, things like maybe a single window clearance system for starting a business, perhaps more streamlined labor laws within the zone, and crucially, substantial tax holidays.
Right, no taxes for a while.
Potentially. Perhaps a complete exemption from state-level taxes for the first 5, maybe even 10 years of operation for qualifying companies. It's about making the environment exceptionally attractive financially.
That model, the SEZ with big tax breaks and regulatory easing, sounds very familiar in global development circles.
It absolutely should. The sources explicitly relate this ambition to the Shenzhen model in China.
Right, the classic example.
Shenzhen, starting as an SEZ, was utterly transformed from basically a peripheral fishing village into a global technology powerhouse, largely because it offered unparalleled tax advantages and administrative freedom in its early days. Bihar seems to hope to replicate some of that transformative effect, turning Patna into a major hub for a new generation of IT and AI development, located right along the Ganga corridor.
And there's another angle too, right? Bringing talent back.
Yes, a key part of the strategy, mentioned explicitly, is incentivizing the massive Bihar diaspora, skilled engineers, entrepreneurs, IT specialists currently working abroad, maybe in Silicon Valley, maybe elsewhere, to return. By creating this attractive ecosystem, offering them opportunities, perhaps seed funding through state programs linked to the SEZ, encouraging them to bring their skills, their capital, and their invaluable global networks back home to Bihar.
But, attracting top talent back, keeping them there, it requires more than just tax breaks and office parks. It needs good schools, good healthcare, a generally high quality of life. Which brings us perfectly to the next challenge, human capital development and social equity. Okay, so the first 3 sections really focused on the hard infrastructure capital, land, technology. Now we move to what feels like the centerpiece of the social transformation side of the plan, using technology and policy to directly address human development needs and also tackle systemic social inequality.
The human element.
Let's start with how AI is planned to be used, specifically to solve 2 chronic supply gaps in Bihar: the shortage of quality teachers and the lack of accessible doctors, especially in rural areas.
Right. The plan seems to view AI here not as some futuristic luxury, but as a critical public service utility, a tool designed to scale human expertise where it's desperately needed.
Scaling expertise.
Okay, and this is particularly relevant given the state's well-documented issues with chronic teacher shortages in government schools and the immense challenge of getting specialist doctors deployed consistently to deep rural areas.
So how does the plan specifically propose utilizing AI in education to tackle that teacher shortage problem? What does that look like in a classroom?
The proposal advocates for the widespread deployment of AI tutors within government schools. These aren't just simple quiz apps. They're described as sophisticated programs capable of providing truly personalized learning pathways for each student.
Personalized how?
Adjusting the difficulty of lessons, providing instant feedback, identifying learning gaps, all based on the individual student's performance in real time. This directly addresses the scalability problem, right? One excellent human teacher can maybe effectively manage 30 students in a class.
If they're lucky.
Right. But AI tutors, theoretically, can deliver personalized, quality-controlled instruction to thousands or tens of thousands simultaneously, potentially supplementing the human teachers. And the sources cite real-world studies supporting this.
Oh yeah? From where?
Including studies conducted in rural Chinese schools, which apparently demonstrated potential for score improvements of up to 30% in core subjects when these AI personalized tutoring systems were implemented effectively alongside teachers.
30% improvement. That's significant. significant, if replicable.
Hugely significant. It addresses that need for tailored learning, which is a major factor in improving educational outcomes everywhere.
Okay, that's education. What about health? Extending affordable, quality diagnostics like reading an X-ray correctly to remote areas has always been incredibly difficult and expensive. How does AI help there?
Well, the same logic of using AI to scale scarce human expertise applies. The blueprint proposes using AI-enabled diagnostics within the existing network of primary health centers, or PHCs.
These are the basic clinics in villages.
Exactly. Often staffed only by basic medical assistants or maybe a general practitioner, not specialists. The idea is to equip these PHCs with AI technology capable of rapidly analyzing medical images like X-rays, maybe detecting diabetic retinopathy from eye scans, performing early detection of certain conditions, interpreting basic lab results quickly.
So the AI does the first pass.
Essentially, yes. Or it provides a highly accurate preliminary analysis. This system allows the few human specialists available, radiologists, pathologists, maybe based in Patna or even elsewhere, to remotely review the complex or flagged cases much more efficiently. They're not looking at every single routine scan.
So it extends the reach of those specialists.
Precisely. It extends affordable, expert-level care further into rural populations without requiring those expensive specialists to physically be present in every single village clinic, 204/7.
And are there concrete domestic precedents for this kind of application in India?
Yes, there are. The plan apparently references the successful AI radiology pilot programs run in Kerala, another Indian state known for healthcare innovation. Those pilots reportedly dramatically reduced diagnostic backlogs and improved accuracy, particularly in rural settings.
So it's seen as feasible.
For Bihar, the feasibility pathway suggested is starting with statewide pilots, potentially rapidly bridging that huge gap that often exists between urban medical excellence and rural medical neglect.
Okay, AI for scaling education and health. Now we come to what the source material itself describes as the most socially revolutionary proposal. This is the one that addresses fundamental structural inequality, recognizing and actually compensating women for their unpaid labor, the plan for wages for household labor.
Yeah, this policy proposal is profoundly structural. It's based on recognizing that all that household and care work, the cooking, the cleaning, the childcare, elder care, is absolutely economically essential for society to function.
But it's traditionally invisible in GDP figures, unpaid.
Exactly. Invisible, unvalued, economically. So the proposal is quite direct. Provide regular stipends for women's domestic work.
Stipends, like a salary.
Like a regular payment, yes.
Oh.
Delivered through DBT, that's direct benefit transfer, the system India uses for electronic welfare payments paid directly into their individual Jan Dhan bank accounts.
Okay, let's just quickly clarify those terms again for listeners. DBT is the government's mechanism for transferring cash directly into people's bank accounts, bypassing middlemen. And Jan Dhan accounts are part of that massive state initiative for financial inclusion, ensuring almost every citizen, especially the poor and women, has a basic bank account.
That's right. The digital financial infrastructure we talked about earlier, the UPI, the bank accounts, it's the essential backbone for delivering this policy efficiently and directly to the intended recipient.
So the plumbing is there. What's the rationale? Why do this?
The primary rationale presented is multifaceted. First, and perhaps foremost, it's about the explicit recognition of the economic value of this labor, giving it monetary worth.
Symbolically important.
Hugely. Second, it's argued it would profoundly enhance women's dignity and financial independence, giving them complete autonomy over resources they earn through their work, even if that work is at home.
Money in their own hands.
Yes. And third, from a macroeconomic perspective, economists often project that placing money directly into the hands of women, especially poorer women, significantly increases overall family consumption, particularly on things like nutrition and education, so it acts as a powerful stimulus for the localized economy as well.
Okay, but this is surely where the political and fiscal risks just skyrocket, right? The document apparently estimates the budget reallocation required could be around 10,000 crore annually. That's roughly 1.2 billion US dollars shifted from existing social welfare budgets.
It's a massive sum.
So you were proposing cutting funds from existing programs that have politically vested interest, to fund this entirely new, potentially controversial stipend. How does the blueprint possibly propose managing the inevitable backlash and just the sheer fiscal sustainability of such a colossal new expenditure?
This is, without doubt, perhaps the most politically sensitive maneuver in the entire blueprint. The risk of fiscal sustainability is acknowledged.
How do they counter it?
The plan seems to offset it by arguing that the downstream economic benefits that increase consumption, maybe improved health and education outcomes, potentially higher long-term female labor force participation if women feel more supported, will eventually return more to the state coffers through increased economic activity and broader tax revenue. It's an investment, not just spending.
A long-term bet.
A very long-term bet. And politically, the plan likely involves needing to very carefully frame this, not as a new expenditure out of thin air, but as a redirection of existing, perhaps inefficient or leaky subsidies into a more direct, efficient empowerment mechanism.
That's a tough sell.
Extremely tough. You'd expect massive social political resistance, both from elements who might dismiss it as merely payment for patriarchy, arguing it reinforces traditional gender roles instead of challenging them, and of course from the beneficiaries and administrators of the old subsidy programs that would face cuts.
We should probably put this policy in a global context too. Are there international examples that support the economic rationale, or is this completely out of the blue?
It's not entirely without precedent, though direct wage models are rare. The source material apparently mentions two key international examples, perhaps for different aspects of the idea.
Okay.
In Venezuela, back in 2007, a constitutional step was actually taken to formally recognize household labor as economic work, which granted homemakers access to Social Security benefits. That's more about recognition.
Right, the principle.
More practically, perhaps, the model might look towards Canada's Quebec province. Quebec implemented very significant childcare stipends and subsidies, making childcare much more affordable or free.
How is that relevant?
While it's a slightly different mechanism subsidizing a service rather than paying wages, Quebec saw a dramatic and intentionally driven increase in female labor force participation because the state effectively absorbed or heavily supported the financial burden associated with traditional domestic duties like childcare. Bihar's approach, the direct payment, seems to aim for achieving both the dignity recognition aspect and the economic stimulus support aspect simultaneously.
Okay. This entire overhaul, then, clean governance, digital land, global logistics, AI scaling healthcare and education, and financial independence for women, it really does sound structurally interdependent. Each piece enables the next.
It seems designed that way.
But the big question remains. How does the state possibly plan to pay for the massive initial investment required for such a holistic transformation? Where does all that seed money come from? So we've established these 7 pretty tightly interconnected policy pillars. Now we need to look at the financial architecture. What makes this massive structural overhaul even potentially possible financially? Let's look at the financing strategy as synthesized in the white paper.
Right, the financing strategy is absolutely crucial because the plan seems deliberately structured to avoid relying solely on, say, massive domestic tax increases, which, as you said, would likely be politically suicidal in a state like Bihar.
Yeah, probably a non-starter.
Instead, it focuses on unlocking dormant capital that already exists within the state and strategically leveraging global financial tools and markets. The strategy seems to be split into 2 main buckets: domestic sources and international sources.
Okay, let's start with the domestic sources. Where is the internal capital supposed to come from?
Domestically, probably the largest single source identified is that innovative use of public assets we discussed, leveraging state-owned public land to issue those land equity bonds.
Monetizing unused state wealth without selling it off.
Exactly, turning dead capital into active investment funds. Secondly, and critically, the plan relies heavily on that structural redirection of existing state subsidies.
Right, we touched on this for zero-interest loans and the women's wages.
Yes. By identifying and eliminating or drastically reforming inefficient, often leak-prone short-term subsidies, the argument is that the resulting freed-up funds can be funneled into dedicated long-term investment funds specifically earmarked for high-impact infrastructure like the railways or the social pilots like AI education.
So it's framed as a kind of capital recycling program within the state budget, optimizing existing expenditure for long-term impact rather than just creating massive new debt burdens, at least initially.
That seems to be the core domestic financial logic, yes. Smart reallocation. But for the really big-ticket items, those refrigerated railways, building the Silicon Ganga SEZ from scratch, domestic funds likely won't be enough. What about the international sources?
Right. For those large-scale infrastructure projects and the major digitization efforts, the plan is apparently to secure multilateral development loans. From who?
From the big players. Entities like the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, ADB. These organizations often favor precisely these kinds of large-scale projects, especially if they have clear developmental goals, anti-corruption components built in, and measurable outcomes, which this blueprint seems designed to provide.
So aligning the plan with what international development banks want to fund.
Exactly. And for the more specific social pilots, the Women's Wages Initiative, the AI education deployment, the target market for funding is different. It's specialized impact investors and global philanthropic foundations.
Why that?
Because these groups specifically seek measurable social returns, like improved learning outcomes or increased women's financial inclusion alongside, or sometimes even prioritized over purely financial viability. The Bihar plan seems tailored to attract that kind of socially motivated capital for those specific programs.
Okay. And finally, the blueprint taps into another potentially huge resource, the diaspora, Biharis living abroad.
Absolutely. A very specific and potentially critical mechanism mentioned is the issuance of diaspora bonds. These are bonds marketed specifically to non-resident Indians, NRIs, and particularly non-resident Biharis, NRBs, living overseas.
What's the advantage of this?
It taps into two powerful things simultaneously. First, the significant capital wealth held by the Indian diaspora globally, and second, their often deep emotional connection and desire to contribute back to their home state. These bonds often carry favorable interest terms for the issuing state, and, just as importantly, they serve as a form of political buy-in, ensuring the diaspora feels personally invested in and perhaps even partially responsible for the success of the state's transformation.
A multifaceted funding approach, then. But a plan of this sheer magnitude, touching so many sensitive areas, must anticipate major resistance, major hurdles. We should probably dedicate a moment to the specific political and technical risks that are cited in the source material and what the proposed mitigation strategies are.
Yes. The designers clearly anticipated significant pushback, particularly from powerful vested interests in the most affected sectors. The source material highlights the most significant political risk as being resistance from landholding elites regarding that digital land reform.
Why them specifically?
Because these powerful groups often benefit immensely from the current ambiguity, the lack of transparency, and sometimes the outright corruption inherent in the existing paper-based land record system. Clear, digital titles threaten that power base.
Makes sense. And how is that anticipated resistance supposed to be mitigated, according to the plan?
Mitigation seems to involve two primary steps. First, ensuring completely transparent adjudication processes for establishing all the new digital titles, making them legally robust to prevent endless court challenges. Second, possibly offering a phased implementation or carefully structured compensation, or perhaps phased ownership recognition for existing claims, essentially trying to mitigate the immediate political backlash and buy time for the new transparent system to take root and demonstrate its benefits.
Okay, handling the politics of land. What about the big technical risks, like the high cost and complexity of those refrigerated railways?
Right, the risk there is twofold. The sheer upfront capital cost and the immense logistical challenge of actually maintaining the supply chain continuity required for a demanding global export market. You can't have spoiled goods arriving in Dubai.
No. So how's that mitigated?
As we discussed earlier, primarily by shifting the capital burden and operational complexity to the private sector via those PPP contracts, and crucially, by securing robust export guarantees before a major investment. The state's role becomes guaranteeing the demand and the policy framework. The private sector's role is guaranteeing the delivery infrastructure and operational excellence. And there's one final technical or perhaps techno-ethical risk worth mentioning. The inevitable data misuse concerns that come with massive AI deployment across sensitive sectors like health and education.
Right. The state would be handling huge volumes of personal sensitive data.
Exactly. The mitigation strategy outlined here is crucial. First, immediately implementing stringent data privacy laws specifically tailored to these new systems. And second, crucially, emphasizing the development of local, sovereign AI solutions where possible.
Meaning AI developed in Bihar or India.
Ideally, yes. Reducing reliance on large foreign tech corporations whose data handling policies might conflict with local privacy needs or national security concerns, keeping data and algorithms more localized and transparent.
Okay. If we just pull back for a second and connect this all back to the bigger picture, the overarching goal, this entire massive, complex exercise is intended to be more than just fixing Bihar's problems, isn't it? It's positioned as a proof of concept.
It absolutely is. The white paper explicitly argues, it seems, that the ultimate goal is to position Bihar not merely as an economically improved Indian state, but as a genuine global laboratory for inclusive, corruption-free
A
development.
laboratory.
Yes. The thinking is, if these 7 highly interconnected pillars, from cashless governance and state-controlled credit to digitized land unlocking capital, zero-interest loans fueling enterprise, cold chains reaching global markets, AI scaling public services, and recognizing women's labor, if all this can structurally lift a population of over 120 million people out of historical underdevelopment in a place like Bihar,
Then the lessons learned.
it offers potentially scalable, replicable lessons for developing regions all over the world that are wrestling with similar intractable issues. Governance deficits, huge demographic pressures, contested land rights, lack of access to capital, the challenge of integrating into the global economy fairly. Bihar as a blueprint for others. #Chag outro.
Well, this has been an incredibly detailed look at what can only be described as a truly radical blueprint for transformation. We've examined the strategic overhaul that starts by trying to eliminate cash corruption and establish state-owned, transparent credit facilities. Then it moves to digitizing every square inch of land to try and create new capital through these land equity bonds. Then building refrigerated rail corridors to export high-value produce globally. And finally, using AI to try and scale crucial services like healthcare and education, while also structurally recognizing the economic value of women's household labor through direct payments.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here, I think, is that the vision isn't just a collection of separate good ideas or individual programs thrown together. It's defined by its integrated nature. It's presented as a chain reaction.
How so?
Well, the digital land reform is designed to secure the collateral needed for the zero-interest credit. That credit helps farmers invest more effectively. The refrigerated logistics then get their higher-value produce to global markets. And the digital infrastructure, the 5G, ensures their children, hopefully better educated by AI tutors and served by remote AI diagnostics, can then participate in the global knowledge economy right from their own villages, maybe becoming those freelancers or online tutors we talked about.
So each piece builds on the others.
Exactly. This intended totality, this interconnectedness, is what makes it feel like a true strategic blueprint, rather than just, say, a list of promises in an election manifesto.
That brings us then to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. Given that this incredibly ambitious blueprint requires immense, sustained, long-term commitment, given that it demands massive political reorganization, and let's be clear, this means dismantling entrenched systems of patronage and corruption, reallocating politically sensitive subsidies away from powerful groups.
Real political battles?
And given that it needs immense unified political will across diverse, highly sensitive sectors where powerful elites currently hold deep stakes, the question that lingers is this. Is the greatest challenge for Bihar ultimately not the financing, which seems cleverly thought out, or even the technology, which is largely available, but rather is the biggest hurdle whether a complex, often fragmented democratic system like India's, operating in a state like Bihar, can actually sustain the unified, multi-decade political commitment required to turn such a detailed blueprint into a lived reality, a genuine global model.
A question of political will and endurance, perhaps above all else.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at you on that one.